All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Here we are once again in a voting session. Uh-oh. Let's get some, there we go. I don't know, somehow Philip took command over what I've got, so.
Turn yours off and back on. There you go.
All right, okay. Let us dive into our, I don't know, 10 or so bills and see how far we get today. First up is number 68.
Senate Bill 68, this is a bill from the Pension Subcommittee. This is a bill that would authorize the Chrisfield Police Department to join the ops.
You like this, Senator Jackson?
We do have a local delegation letter too.
Got a delegation letter, the whole bit. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. All right, this is the part I was supposed to trust Senator Jackson on. He says there's a delegation passed this morning, even though we don't have a letter yet. Oh. Okay. Okay. So we'll hold that.
156.
Yeah, and you know, of course, Senator Jackson, all the pension bills you're going to be doing. Yeah. Just the way it works. Nothing special. That's right. There'll be another. Now let's see. Here's someone to punish. 189, Senator Roosevelt.
Thank you. There you go.
What do we got here?
So Senate Bill 189, this is legislation that would authorize some data sharing between the Comptroller's Office and the Maryland Saves. That's the program you got the briefing on yesterday, the Maryland Small Business Retirement Program. You do have a reprint at your desk. The Comptroller's Office had asked for some clarifying changes just to more directly identify what information can or can't be shared. You'll find that on page 3 of your reprint. Yeah, the amendments before you from Senator Roosevelt were requested by the Comptroller.
But with the Controller's Office and the codes.
So bottom line, you're going to be getting the
Business
way to
entity.
the way to get a hold of them.
Yes,
Yes,
From the comptroller, but nothing else.
right.
correct.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 283.
Senate Bill 283 would establish a behavioral health workforce investment fund to provide reimbursement for education training, certifying, recruiting, placing, and retaining behavioral health professionals and paraprofessionals. The bill does not have a mandated funding amount. There is a study requirement for the Maryland Healthcare Commission to do a workforce needs assessment, and part of that assessment would recommend the initial funding amount for the fund to provide its purpose.
It's not a mandate. What's the million for though?
So the fiscal note assumes
It'll be that,
that it would be at least $1 million to fund its intended purposes.
but only if the administration includes it in their budget.
There is no required dollar amount. I do have an amendment submitted by Senator Roosevelt on page 4. This will be part of the Maryland Healthcare Commission study. There's a requirement that they coordinate with the Behavioral Health Administration, Maryland Higher Education Commission, and other interested stakeholders. The amendment would also specify that they coordinate with Maryland Department of Labor and the Career and Technical Education Committee.
Good amendment.
I imagine you'd think so.
Yeah, no, they're just the relevant players, obviously. On workforce anatomy.
Okay, on the amendment, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, unanimous all around.
And
What do we get?
finance is secondary in this one, so this one.
Right,
Finance.
right, that'll go to finance. Yeah, did we get a final set of amendments on this one? The next one, 114.
Yeah, there's a reprint in there.
Okay, great.
All right, Senate Bill 114. This deals with the notification process for constant yield tax rate. There were some discussions. I had some discussions with MML and the chair. Just about the general topic and various notification options, which MML also worked with the sponsor and came up with a couple of proposals. So with the reprint you have in front of you, the essence of it is really handwritten page 3. Yeah, handwritten page 3. So basically, instead of putting notice about constant yield, I guess in recognition that that is a term of art that is not clear. Instead, what this does is say that if a taxing authority intends to increase the tax rate, then they need to do a public notice, both in the newspaper and putting a copy of the notice on the website of the taxing authority. It's one of the amendments in the middle of page 3. And then if they happen to not have a website, which MML reported, I think 4 or 5 municipalities don't, then a copy is posted in a place accessible to the public. So the rest of the changes are really conforming the existing code sections in order to accomplish that change. On page 4, as you know, with the constant yield notification, there is actually a quoted section in law of what that notice needs to say verbatim. So on page 4, this is the quoted section of what it needs to say verbatim. Again, striking out things that pertain to constant yield and instead saying in the middle of the page there that here's the proposed income tax property rate change from this to that, as well as the public hearing schedule that the locality will be having on that change.
So, I've had a problem with constant yield for years, since when I was back on the county council. Nobody understands it. I don't find it useful at all for the public discourse, really. So I think effectively this gets rid of it, in terms of a notification.
In terms of notification to the public, yes, it does maintain, and the on pages 1 through 2, that new code section that's put in there, it will maintain among what I'll call the practitioners of property tax, the transfer of information on assessable basis from SDT to the localities so that they can still make informed decisions on their tax rates. That happens to use the term constant yield rate, but that would just be information shared with the locality.
Perfectly reasonable that they be thinking about that as part of their deliberations. What it changes things to is requiring tax rate changes to be publicized, much like they used to have to just put out the constant yield notification. Now, mind you, whenever there's a tax rate increase, usually that's going to be part of a public hearing. That would be part of a public hearing. But this is an additional requirement for notification on the tax rates. And I'm happy to take questions or issues. Senator Quarterman.
No, I think it's pretty clear. And then so it's just the only time it has to be publicized is if the rate itself is going to increase, right? That whole constant yield thing they put out every year, which just confuses everybody, where the rate hasn't changed, but because of assessments, they're like, yeah, some taxes revenue is going up per se, but people start thinking their tax rates getting increased where it's not. It's trying to eliminate some of that confusion, right? Basically is what we're getting at. And so it's just the tax rate itself. If the constant yield happens, if the rate isn't being changed, but obviously assessments are bringing revenue, there's just no notification as far as that whole public notice per se. Obviously information is still out there, but it tries to eliminate some of the confusion. I think that everyone sees across the state, just That's what you're saying, right? Pretty
That,
much.
that is, I believe, the intent of these amendments. Yes.
Yeah, and I think the statutory evidence of your statement is on page 4 of the reprint, this quoted verbatim of what a notice should say.
Mhm.
At the top of the page, it's striking all the various terminology about maintaining a current rate and what that does to the revenues to fully offset. I mean, that kind of all of that.
Yeah.
Confusing ways of talking about it is struck from the required notification.
Other questions or concerns? It's funny, this has come up before. I think we had this bill even last year. And I was a little reluctant, I think. But the more I talked about it with various people, and MML and Mako, you know, it has just been a confusing problem for decades, in my opinion. And I think this is a significant improvement.
Yeah, the other thing I should mention on page 2, under the current constant yield tax rates for if the difference in the yield is 25,000 or less, there is an ability for the director of SDAT to exempt a municipal corporation. I think that is obsolete now under this, but I did want to just point out that there is no way a waiver doesn't exist anymore under this scheme.
Did we strike that?
Yes,
Any mo-
yes.
Any other questions? Everybody get it? All right. Second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. I know. It's kind of funny. All those years and I'm like, no. All right. What's that? Good question 1. Okay, 235.
Okay, Senate Bill 235 deals with local school districts looking at school construction projects and the viability of using solar or geothermal. So current law, basically the way that the statute was written, it actually required the IAC to adopt regulations that then required the county board to do this analysis. Regulations were actually never adopted, yet everyone was still complying with the provisions of the statute, including counties doing the evaluation and the IAC then doing a compilation report, identifying all of the instances where counties did evaluate, but then choose not to. So to kind of clarify and get to more kind of an active language type requirement, if you look at page 2 of the reprint, it's kind of codifying current practices, basically saying a county board in a certain phase and only for new construction or major renovation, they need to include an evaluation. Solar panels, including solar panels installed on the roof, which some have certainly already actually included that, but that's how Senator West bill came in, was to.
Right, the roof part wasn't included before.
It wasn't specific in the code. However, some schools were already evaluating it on the roof or above parking lots. And then what was added via an amendment that I believe was spoken about during the testimony was to also evaluate geothermal heating and cooling. So that is new over current law. And then it has the same exact process of, you know, if they're still determining it, then they need to submit a report. Also on page 2 in subsection B, this was at the request of a senator here, that the IAC cannot delay the approval if a county's evaluation and report has not been submitted timely. Well, by saying submitted in a timely manner, it is still, however, a requirement, just if it's not exactly on time. No. It's a little wiggle room there. Then also on page 3, It does also have an applicability clause, again, at the request of a senator to make sure that these changes would not apply until basically these design documents are being done after June 1, 2023. So any existing project that has already reached that design phase would not be required to include the evaluation of geothermal.
Motion,
Yeah.
questions?
So under current law, current practice. We think they're doing the evaluations.
They are.
Just as it relates to solar, not necessarily as it relates to solar on the rooftops. But maybe.
Well, I
that's-
actually, I pulled the most recent
everyone-
report. And they are talking about, it's a 3-page report here from the IIC.
They put in a parking lot.
Yes, there have been some, so schools have evaluated the use of solar technologies for roof mounted. They said that usually schools aren't doing that, however, because the limitation cited is that it's not appropriate in the lengthy payback for the panels. But apparently some schools are renting that space to a solar entity to defray that cost. Yeah.
Well, so what I'm asking, that's a great answer. Beyond that, so there's a regular summary that IAC does of what people said and what they're doing.
Exactly. They compile all of the reports that the locals submit to them, put it in one report, and then.
And just
Submit.
glancing at the reports, there's reason to believe that people are actually doing it. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, so let's see. And this report actually goes all the way back to when this law was first passed, which is back to 2013. And there are, let's see, number of projects with solar technologies in the design development document submissions. Allegheny is 1, Baltimore City has 3, Baltimore County has 5. Dorchester has 1, Frederick has 3, Hartford 1, Howard 1. And Wacomico 1. I'll add though that you
I
guys
didn't get
remember,
Prince George's there. That's interesting.
yeah, Prince George's is 0. I will note too that there's another current law about green buildings and LEED silver status
Right.
that was passed maybe 10
Separately.
years ago,
Yeah, yeah.
12 years ago. So that's also out there in the mix for school construction projects, again with waiver provisions, but
Nice.
it's been in there.
Senator Benson?
But listen, can't school systems do this now? I mean, I'm trying to figure out why we need this bill.
So the majority of
Is
this,
this to encourage them to put the solar panels on the new schools that are being built? Is
Yeah.
that the sole reason for this bill?
yes, what
Well,
is,
that and geothermal
Right.
now also.
so geothermal is not in current law. So these evaluations that the schools are currently doing are not including geothermal. So that would be the new substantive requirements of this evaluation.
Okay, thank you.
The only concern that I have, I'm not so much for my own school system, but for some of the others across the state that are scraping together every penny they have to build a school. I don't want to put anybody in a position where we have piled on so many qualifications that they can't afford to build a new school in their district. Just saying.
I mean, I hear you. I find it hard to believe that you can't have a contractor come in and look at it real quick and say, hey, this is a good idea or bad idea. And they're gonna give you they're probably gonna give you an estimate on what it is before you even have to do anything. You have to pay them even. They're just gonna be interested in coming to.
Ken, can I have that back? Oh, I hear what you're saying, but I think some of the people in the more rural areas get pretty nervous when we start adding more things on to the qualifications for their schools. Just saying.
You know, I mean, it could be, quite frankly, and I know I happen to have a school that is did geothermal in my district. Actually, my kids went to. And this is an opportunity to save money.
Yeah.
So this is not, you know, they should be thinking of ways of saving money. That would be my, I can't imagine why you wouldn't want to at least look into these things.
Is there, I guess my question just is, how much upfront money do you have to put in for geothermal in order to recognize the savings later? That's just,
All those things are a calculation that you'd want to make ahead of time. There's no question before you put any upfront money.
right.
In my opinion.
And I think current process allows for those scenarios because this bill is only talking about what a county board needs to evaluate. But if they choose to not do it, actually incorporate it into the project, then that's part of what they're including in the report, but it's not requiring them to actually incorporate these.
So sorry.
Sure, my question. Thank you and have a nice day.
You too, Senator.
Senator McCray.
And just a point of information, Mr. Chair, like when Ms. Schisler referenced the 3 schools in Baltimore City, 2 of them, they had gotten grant money from MEA to be able to make it energy efficient. Like this is totally about like having the resources to be able to do it. Those resources were cut out specifically for that purpose. And that's why we were able to, we want to do it. It's just, you have to decide what's important.
So I look at it as, so we're gonna build a school. We do this cost study, and we're like, we can't afford to do it. However, what about in the engineering of the new school saying, hey, we'd like to do it, so why not engineer the roof? So it's a quickly, bolt on in a future use instead of having to do major construction to change the roof line. You could do it in the early phase. And I don't know if that would be add that to it to say, hey, 2 options, or I guess 3 options, no, yes, or in the future. And because of that, we're willing to change our, instead of having a, pitch roof, they might say, hey, we'll go flat roof so that we can bolt on in the future.
Just from, in my opinion, I mean, I agree with you that that's a great reason to be thinking about that. But I'm not sure we want to get into that level of prescription for what they have to think about. I gotta assume that they're professionals trying to figure this stuff out. Senator?
I just want to move the bill favorable as amended.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. 305.
305, local bill, you do have a letter for Carroll County, just their local bonding authority of 65.6 million, no amendments.
Wait a minute. Carroll County wants $65 million worth of bonds.
More debt, more debt, more debt.
Wow. I can't. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
I guess I haven't been picking out people to do these things, but we will.
Mm,
All right, we'll get that after 328. Yeah,
Yes,
it did. The Carroll County one? Yes.
unanimous.
328.
Okay. Senate Bill 328, I'm also not been notified of any amendments for it. This would be all brand new law pertaining to the Board of Public Works and beginning on October 1, 2024, so a delayed applicability, that they would have to allow members of the public to electronically submit any sort of comments on the agenda. Because they already obviously can take them, and they already do take them from the public, in written, and they include it in the minutes and things like that. But this would basically require an electronic system to post it. And then they would need to be included in each meeting packet, be posted online 24 hours in advance, and be retained online on the website. Let's see. And then there is an explicit requirement that the board needs to employ at least one more staff position than they currently have in order to carry this out. So the fiscal note assumes both programming costs in the first year to create this website portal, and then an additional position throughout.
Yes.
I think, is this the bill that had like the 3 Board of Public Works sign on and I'd move favorable.
I do have a letter for all their signatures. Yep.
Second.
All right. That's green endorsement. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Again, unanimous. Senator Heddleman, you'll do that one, of course.
Heddleman, the sponsor.
We're holding the next one.
Yes.
The next we need to hold. Late minute question came in. All right. Senator King's bill. Great. 282. Love the trees, Bill.
So this bill establishes the Maryland Forestry Education Fund. The purpose of the fund is to provide grants for training, outreach, and education opportunities for the landowners and the district forestry boards, as well as the local governments and businesses. The governor is required to appropriate $250,000 to the fund annually, beginning in fiscal 25.
So I support this bill, but what I want to use it just to talk about some philosophy as we move forward. I'd like to minimize the number of mandates that we have for a number of reasons. One, because of our new authority and our ability to put things in. Two, at the request of, and I know governors always request this, but I sort of have a unwritten understanding agreement that if we proceed that way, they're likely to still put the money in every time. Now, those are kinds of decisions made by governors and their departments along the way. I don't know exactly how to deal with these. I don't know that there's an answer all around. I'll tell you, for instance, my bill today that we heard, the waiver bill for the community colleges, has a sizable $10 million mandate in it. And I'm thinking maybe I think I'm going to come in with an amendment to just eliminate it as a mandate and see how the administration responds. I mean, we're in the first year of a new administration. I think it's a reasonable approach to take. Again, given our authority, I think I'd like to move that way. It doesn't have to be a hard and fast rule, but I think it's one that we should be thinking about as we move forward. This is your bill, Senator, and you have a question.
I'll agree with you. Let the public know that I agreed with you on that. But I just I feel kind of sorry for some of these groups that have to come in every single year begging for money, and just it's hard for them to operate not knowing what their funding is going to be from year to year. That's the other side of that issue. I'll go along with you as far as mandates go, but
Yeah,
there's just got to be some answer in between there too.
there does. And I think your point is well taken. I actually have been a fan of doing mandates for years in both administrations, Republican and Democratic administrations. Of course, we didn't have question one before, and was a fundamental difference. And I'm not quite sure how to think about this. We're in a learning phase right now.
Yeah.
For the next couple of years, and I'm willing to give a little room. But I agree with you 100%. The reasons I have been a fan for it is because, as you point out, if you're running an organization, like in this case, this forestry group, how do you plan and pay for your staff? And how do you know if you're not have some bigger sense? It's never a complete guarantee, because mandates are not an absolute guarantee either. We have to come up and pay for the cost of things when a governor didn't put it in the budget. But it does give a little more security for organizations. It's a tricky thing. I'm actually more inclined, to be honest with you, to do mandates or less mandates on bigger things, like the bill that I had, because there's more room for play in that budget for organizations as opposed to a group like this, which there's less play.
There's less play and I mean, it's on their mind all the time, whether they can move forward to do much because they never know for sure whether they're going to have any funding or not.
Yeah. So one of the things that we can do that I think sort of as a compromise maybe on this bill, instead of making it being a sort of endless mandate, why don't we put it in for 2 years and see how they do? And
That's a
we'll
great
take it
idea.
from there.
Okay. Good job. Thank you.
Okay. So, what's that?
The jar used to stand up full.
Yes.
60% of the budget mandated.
Right, yeah. That's because you shouldn't be using those things, demonstrations on the floor. I'll never forget the dinosaur and,
We did the mealworms.
oh, yeah. Senator Jackson and.
I would,
Senator Hubbard.
yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to amend on to this bill, being that my district has changed drastically. And I seriously sometimes can't see the forest for the trees.
Oh,
Sorry.
and that's what you wanted to say. Senator Roosevelt.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the big issue that you raised, that and really agree with everything that you and Senator King said, but put another little perspective into it. One is, I think as we develop a new culture, given that we have the new budget power we have, we need to be thinking long-term, which means beyond the current gubernatorial administration. And so governors come and go and legislatures come and go. So I think in terms of the culture, we ought to think about that as part of it and not have it personality based, I guess what I would say. So that's one piece. The other piece is I think the nuances that you all were getting into are really important ones, and there are more that we should be thinking about. I mean, there are clearly some programs where they have to be a long-term. I mean, the obvious example is school funding. And so some fit in that category. Some, I would say the community college one, as you said, is less in that category. It's bigger, they have other resources. So I think there are a lot of nuances here that I would say the principle for now ought to be case by case, think this through.
Yep. No.
Thank you.
That's right. All right,
Second.
all in favor? Hold on. We have the 2-year amendment, and we also have at least a couple of people who want to be on this bill. Raise your hand if you want to be on the bill.
I don't want to be on for 3 years.
I get that. I guess everybody's on. Okay. All right, very good. And our last bill for today, 312.
The last bill is Senate Bill 312, which repeals the sunset for the tax clinics for low-income Marylanders. The bill maintains the funding provision, which authorizes the governor to include $250,000 in the annual budget beginning in FY '24. And it requires the administrator, which is the comptroller, to distribute the $250 to the fund each year.
So here we go again. This is another one where I think it's a great bill. I think it's important. Any thoughts? Okay, so you want to just keep the mandate as is. That's what we're talking about.
This one has authorizing language, it's a main and other shares.
Why does it say establishes a mandated distribution in the?
It's a May. Fiscal year 24. The government may include in the annual budget appropriations of the fund.
And it previously was a.
Yeah, because of current one.
Senator, this was in there last year, and it was not a mandated.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's having the administrator, so it's the person who administers the unclaimed property fund, put in $250,000 a year, so low-income families could be represented on their state taxes. So I see shall in there. It's said that this shall remain effective, and then
Let's distribute that money.
The tax class.
After making,
What's this May? It's interesting because the bill has both may and shall in different places.
well, I think we shall pass it and we may or may.
So.
Is it any different than the bill that we did last? This is how long has the program been going on?
It was 2 years.
Here's,
So it's been
So-
operating for 2 years and does it have the same exact language?
yes. Yeah, the only difference is we're just eliminating the sunset.
All right.
There is a difference between a mandated appropriation and a mandated distribution, which if you're taking it from the abandoned property fund, that is a mandated distribution.
Right.
I see. So it has to be taken out, but it doesn't necessarily have to be given out. That theoretically.
Theoretically, but in order to spend anything, there has to be appropriate.
Yeah. All right. It's worked for 2 years. Why don't we just leave it?
Don't mess it up.
Let's not mess it up. All right. All is in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. That concludes our voting session for today. Yeah, good work. Good work, everybody. Thank you.